All right, welcome back everybody to Cool's Reviews, part two of the day, as we're delving into the Sir No Face trilogy. I actually don't know if it has like a official title, so we'll just call it the Sir No Face trilogy. And this one's kind of interesting because it's the Two Face the Gray, and it's interesting for us because of how we viewed it. Sam watched this one first, and then watched this one second. Because if you didn't like know it was a trilogy, it's like not marketed as like the second part. So it's very easy to like just jump into this one, especially now with it like on streaming apps like Discovery Plus and stuff like that. So if you guys are watching this and have not watched Sir No Face, make sure to go check that one out, then check out our review, and then go check out Two Face the Gray, then come back and see what we're discussing.
Mhm.
So, as usual, my name is Keegan. Joining me today is.
Sam.
All right. And this one, I granted, I don't know where the third one's going, but so far, this is an intriguing documentary series because it covers at least two parts of the paranormal world. The first one was mainly about ghosts and ghost hunting, whereas this one tackles a lot of like UFOs and alien topics. I do not believe it's going to go into cryptids in part three, but at least those are the main categories of the paranormal world. Sam's our group's UFO expert. That's like his main expertise as far as his shows that he does mainly with weekly abductions. So, guys, if you haven't checked those out, make sure to go click that playlist link above. Lots of great episodes. And I know we're working hard on some ideas for Roswell, as well as some other pretty fascinating UFOs. But since Sam watched this before me and kind of had a different perspective since it was the second and he watched it first, we'll let him start and just kind of how he viewed it without knowing the first part.
I want to start off with saying that I'm in no means an expert. I'm an enthusiast on the topic, but I wouldn't consider myself an expert. But I do like to indulge in extraterrestrial side of the cryptids. Yeah, when I watched the second one first, I was confused at first when I first watched it, just because of the fact that there was like footage of like what this team caught as like a ghost, but then they like people out there like doing question when they did questioning and answering at their like showing of, I guess, the movie, they were saying that they caught like a gray alien. So I was kind of confused because I was just like, well, this is a weird way to just start it off. Another interesting part about it is like a dude shows up at one of the like showings. I assume they were touring all around the world, and I did just rewatch it, but I'm not sure if it was actually in Australia when the dude showed up or if it was at a different date, because I know he took the paranormal team and himself, and they were like traveling around to different parts of the world doing this showing. And so I'm not on the specifics of where this dude showed up at, but this dude showed up at one of the shows and handed the director Chad a kind of envelope with like a bunch of with some stuff inside of it. When he was done with one of the talks, he ends up going like to his house or to the apartment that he was staying at the time, since they were traveling. And he goes starts to go through the documents, and he comes across like pictures of UFOs, a bunch of like mutilations between animals and humans, and then also some other like talking about like the three faults that humans have done so far. He didn't know how to feel about it because he was going, I always forget that reef.
What reef?
The reef that he was going to the next day.
Oh, Great Barrier.
Yeah, the Great Barrier Reef. Which isn't that in Australia?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I guess it was in Australia.
That's how I took it, but I do get where it's kind of confusing because they are like talking how they did it in Australia, but then they're showing other places, including Denver. If you They say they're up in Denver. I didn't catch, at least not off the top of my head, I don't remember the name of the theater, but at least I know they can because there was a Nine News article about it.
So it might have happened in Australia, might have I don't it's hard to say, but the dude got I mean, it would kind of make sense for it to happen in Australia, but this dude gave him this thing. He was going to the Great Barrier Reef the next day, and he just couldn't stop thinking about what he saw within it. Kind of discussed it with like his group of friends, and I think Craig was there. I don't remember. Was he on the boat?
I believe, at least I'm pretty sure it showed him on the boat. Usually when Chad is in Australia, it seems like him and Craig are together.
Yeah, hanging out.
Yeah, so I think it's good to kind of like, even if it's like a guess, I'm pretty sure they were.
Kind of didn't want any part of it just because of, I mean, if you're given documents from a government agent, which I'm assuming that dude was, that would be a interesting road to follow because who knows where it can go and what would happen. As he was like leaving to head back to, I think he is in LA. Was it San Monaco? I think it was San Monaco.
It's California. We'll say it
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah. So as he was going to head back to California, threw the documents away because he wanted no part of it. And then right before he got in the car to leave, he went back up to the room and took the documents with him and then kind of put them aside for a while. And then I think it's like around like close to halfway, like the whole documentary kind of changes into like the history and like talking about what was in the documents, which is quite interesting because a lot of them we know about. Like, obviously, this dude was like a government representative. And so there was a lot of stuff that he was mentioning that we may not know about just because of the whole declassification or the classification of what the stuff was. But it was interesting. Like, I'm not too sure how to take it. Like, I won't credit it as like factual, but I can't discredit it either, just because it's hard to say. I will mention this, like, if it did happen in Australia, it would kind of make sense because that's where the investigation was, and also that their government like hired that team to investigate. So it could have been someone within the government that didn't like something was happening and decided to like release something to these guys that while they were there without like gaining suspicion on himself from it.
I think what differs for me compared to last episode where I was digging into a lot of it is a lot of this, like Sam said, is about the history of what's in those packets. And I feel like a lot of it we have touched upon, especially with Unacknowledged, the Stephen Greer documentary, which
Well, that
he's
wasn't in there. That was something that that dude was watching. That wasn't in the documents. That was just something that he was when he was doing his research on
no,
like
I'm
what was in the documents.
no, I'm saying like a lot of what was covered you can find in that Stephen Greer documentary, Unacknowledged.
Oh yeah, true.
So I feel like there's it's hard because a lot of it there's a lot of like actual like for sure history in there, right?
Yeah.
And then there's sprinkled of UFO stuff, and then there's sprinkles of conspiracy. I think I have more issue with the conspiracy portion, at least one in particular. Like Sam said, it's the first half is almost similar to the Sir No Face, where he's like touring the world this time. Like he's on his shows on podcasts and news agencies, and then he's given presentations. It's kind of hard to tell when and where because there's different dates that keep popping up, and so it's something I'll have to watch again. But it seemed like it was a little all over the place as far as what they showed us. I think the team had investigated between 2013 and 15 as far as the Whisper team, if I'm remembering this correctly. And then the original documentary is 2017, and then this documentary is 2020. So there's 3 years between the original one to here that I guess they're touring and doing like the press stuff. Like if you release a movie, it's kind of like or a book or anything. This is kind of what you do. And like Sam said, that's when they come across the tattooed man, as they call him, which is kind of funny because he didn't want to be like his identity revealed, but they like for sure tell you the tattoo that's on his face. They like pop up a picture and it's just like, well, how many people have that on their face? Like, just imagine
Well,
it's
I mean,
like,
true, but if it is a secret government thing, nobody's gonna ever see him,
but just imagine you're like working in the office and you just see Jerry and you're like, oh, that's Jerry's tattoo and he was gone last week.
right?
Just Jerry, was that you? But yeah, it's kind of similar, I guess, how they're in Australia, much like the first one, where he was giving a presentation. He was talking about his other documentary, Blood Red Sky, which is another like ghost hunting one. I kind of did a little bit of research on that, so I'm sure at some point we'll check it out just to kind of see the flavor. And in that one, obviously, that's where he meets Whisper, and they show him the peekaboo or Sir No Face. Depends on who you talk to within the group, at least with the interviews that we've seen.
Mhm.
And still today, I'm just like, maybe it's just because they were there at the time. That's why he showed him the evidence. But it just feels like if you have really big evidence like that, you maybe go to like TAPS, right? The Atlantic Paranormal Society, Ghost Adventures, you could go Josh Gates, Giles Pedro. Like there's Jack Osborne, right? Jack Osborne has a whole TV series about like people sending their footage and then he talks about it. But again, that could just be happenstance. They were both talking paranormal and like he said, he just heard the phrase full body apparition. In this one, he's giving a presentation, and this is where it was kind of mixed because at parts they're talking about Blood Red Sky, and then parts it's Sir No Face, and I'm assuming it was Sir No Face that he's giving the presentation on when the tattooed guy showed up and gave him the packet. And like Sam said, he threw it away, and then he came back for it before he left. I mean, imagine if you were like the janitor and just like opened it up and saw like a mutilated person, you'd probably like have some like weird questions going on.
Right?
Just like just like
No,
open it up,
not just leaving a trash can at a hotel
right? Just like,
without them being like, "What were you doing here?"
sir, we see you checked out and we found a packet of mutilated human corpses. We're gonna have to bring you in for some questioning. But yeah, then he gets back to the States and I guess he really didn't tell us the exact time frame, but it seemed like this was early on in Sir No Face's like media tour. And then as the tour went on, he says he kept getting people that said it was a gray. The video they showed for like people saying it was a gray back to him seemed kind of like, is that the best you have? Like, cause like the one lady that was like in focus, like didn't even move, like super stoic. But I guess these people like brought him back to the packet, and that's when he gets contacted by a second individual, right? Because David or Daniel
Right?
David,
He gets an email
but it's not Tattooed Man, right? This is a separate person, right?
potentially.
It
It's hard
see,
to
it's
really say because,
there's so much that gets thrown at you. It's hard to like remember where pieces go.
well, yeah,
So
because the tattoo man didn't want to be like revealed at all, so it could be like a separate like entity
yeah, and this guy,
that
I
like back him.
yeah, I think his name was David Daniel Skyfall, right? Or is it Daniel David Skyfall? It's one of the two. And then he makes mention that it sounds like a James Bond villain, and I was like, no, Skyfall is a James Bond movie. Which there's a David and a Daniel that work on it. There's also Dave and a Dan. So lots of technical people. I saw that was kind of weird. Possibly it's a suit, like just a fake name, but at the same time, it's like, it's just weird to me. But this guy gives him
Most likely it's
more,
a fake.
yeah. Which then I don't know. I guess it could be like he saw Skyfall and just picked two, but at the same time, I think David is the middle name because I was like, oh, it's weird that Chad and this guy have the same middle name, and then his friend that edited the film was Dan. So at the same time, I was like, is it them? Like, I don't know. That's just kind of weird. But he gives him long, he says book sized email with lots of links. And I guess that's when it clicks back to the packet because there's a lot of like overlapping stuff. And that's when he gets more interested and goes back to look at the Sir No Face, which he says is a gray. And then later in the film, they say grays are not aliens, they're robots disguised as aliens, and then later in the film it is an alien. So I guess it's a gray is what he's saying in this film compared to a ghost in the first one. And like I had told Sam earlier, I want to take both movies because in the first one it shows like the thing come out and then go back in. And so it's not like they just stopped it. Like it shows it come in and out of frame, and I want to compare it because they like show you here where it looks like an alien or a gray. Like for any people that don't know what a gray is, it's pretty much if you think of an alien, it's going to be a gray, right? I mean, that's pretty much the most common alien design is a gray.
Yeah,
Sometimes they
basically.
see them as green, but it's still like the gray design. Big heads, big eyes, usually smaller in stature, depending on who you talk to, 4 to 6 fingers, sometimes 3 too. I think I've seen them like depicted as 3 fingers. And usually they come in ships of 3, like with 3 like people on or beings on board. At least whenever you hear like a UFO crash, it's always like there was three beings on this UFO. In the Roswell one, because there was the like talk about how at Roswell they found at least one alive, one like mid dying, and one dead. So again, there pops up the number 3, which is another weird number in the paranormal field. Obviously, the 3 knocks is usually kind of like a sign of something mocking the Trinity when you're ghost hunting. At least that's what a lot of people say. Or the 3 scratches could be demonic. So I guess before we get further into it, what do you make of like this tattooed face man?
I don't know. I mean, it's really hard to say. It seemed like they captured a picture of him, maybe,
Yeah, I
which is
couldn't tell
also
if it
weird.
was like real pictures or like recreation, but it seems
It,
like it was like two real. I think it was like 2 different real pictures of him like watching Chad talk at this presentation.
of just him being in the crowd.
Hmm.
If it is a government thing, he could be a part of like the Men in Black group or like a very like secretive group of like a branch of military easily.
And I don't know the name of the hat, but it was very Crocodile Dundee in design. He like had like this hat, and if you have seen Crocodile Dundee, and then he just pretty plain clothes. They didn't obviously show his face, but at least from the pictures, we couldn't see the tattoo, so it must have been on the opposite side, I'm guessing.
Yeah, his like right side.
So his packet, like Sam said, included pictures of like mutilated animals, mutilated people. Then it included like, and this is the kind of weird part, but it included pictures of like UFOs. It showed UFOs from Carlos Diaz, who captured these in like 1981, I believe. They're bright orange, kind of red. It looks like if somebody either photographed the sun or like a nuclear explosion, you know how that orange looks. But they're like these like kind of shape, well, kind of almost diamond, tic tac ish looking things. There's a 2002 or 4 DVD called Ships of Light by Carlos Diaz. So if you guys want to check out more of that, there's another link. Was it his packet or was it the email that talked about the volcano?
I think it was the email.
Okay.
That's when it was like that's when he started to do the like second part where like anytime he said allegedly in there, it's like that person kind of communicating it.
Yes, yeah, okay. That makes more sense. Okay, so I guess just based off of that little like kind of collection from the packet, how do you feel? I mean, because these pictures weren't like hidden. I mean, you can find them on Google.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel with this portion of the story? Like him receiving these, and I mean, I guess maybe he never saw them if you're not looking for UFOs, right?
True.
Um, but it just he made it kind of seem like they were super hidden or something.
True, or he could just be re-showing it because it was like a significant point of like something, of like a specific event or something, and like which he dived deep in. Like it's I mean, it's hard to say because like most of that stuff really wasn't super hidden,
Mhm.
but like then some of it kind of is.
Yeah, so this part for me, I mean, it didn't seem to anything out of the ordinary. I mean, obviously, I don't know if he'd be the first person if I had like this packet of UFO stuff that I would go to. There's a lot of really high ranked UFO investigators that I would probably go since that's like their main expertise or main focus. So that was my main, just like, okay, it's kind of the same thing where he's just like given this. I don't know what happens in part three, but I hope he's not also given another just randomly thing while he's like touring. And Sam's like kind of smiling, so now I'm just like, oh.
I don't think he was given anything in the
Okay.
third one.
I was gonna be like, man, three times, and I don't know how much I could believe that. Like, okay,
Right.
once, maybe twice. And this one just seems even more. I mean, the ghost thing, whatever. Like I said, he was there, whatever. The UFO one just seemed kind of odd because it's not his area of expertise, and he was promoting it as a ghost film, as far as we know at the time.
True.
I mean, there is some to be said, perhaps, that when he says like people were saying they were going to see an alien, that maybe he coached them because he even says that he wouldn't say alien, but he would kind of say some things, and I'm like, so were you coaching them like to have this idea? I don't know. I wasn't there. We weren't there, so we can't tell you for sure.
True.
And then that before they get to like the email, there's also a part where they bring back what's his name? Caleb? The other guy?
Okay. Craig.
Craig. I'm just like, Caleb? They bring back Craig, and he's really only in this for a brief portion. Um, he says while he was at his old house, which they don't give the address for, obviously to protect the owners there, but at the same time, we can't like fact check because you can pull like residential stuff and see who's lived there on assessors and stuff.
True.
But he says while he was there, he was
Random people
visited.
showing
Yeah, and these people like, and they call them like the smile people, which they made a movie recently called Smile. I don't think it's about the same thing, but these
that
sketch
it
art,
is.
we're gonna watch it now and just be like, who's the producer? Oh, Chad, is that you? uh, but yeah, I guess they were like just saying some strange things like, hey, this movie's not going to come out even though it already had at the time, which, and then he said he turned around to get his phone and turned back and they were gone.
Oh yeah,
And
so it doesn't explain like the time frame of when that happened. Because when these people could have confronted them could have been like before the movie came out. It's very possible because then they also go into like some footage of that night of the investigation that they didn't show in the first one. And he explains that they didn't show it in there just because it was, I don't know. I don't know why he didn't show it in there. It was just weird.
yeah, and we'll get to that. I actually almost forgot about that portion. But yeah, so this is kind of one place where I was like, this is odd.
Yeah,
And
it
not
was
not
like after watching the first one, like the second one seemed a lot more odder or like more unusual than I originally when I first originally watched it. Because I was like, when I first originally watched it, it kind of like he came across this paranormal group with this footage, and then it talked about like how they had like an absent in time, where like time kind of went forward an hour, like quickly on them, and then like the extraterrestrial port. So like watching the first one and then this one, it was just like, well, why wasn't that a part of the first one? Like,
Yeah, and this is where I have like two issues. And we'll get to the time thing because that's definitely something you report, even if you don't think it's aliens. If people are like, hey, we just lost an hour of time, you report that. All right,
right?
Sam. Well, we're at Adams State. If you think you lost time, you let me know. I know you would.
I mean, it'd be something to like for us to do because it was interesting that they would like mark their time and see how long they've like been there. So it would become something to like kind of get in the habit of doing is like checking the time because when we're at certain places, just knowing when we got there and then just like periodically kind of checking the time and just seeing like how it was going. Because I think I looked at the time a couple times in Adams State and like it was going slowly.
Yeah, and so I guess we'll discuss the time and then we'll go back to like those people because he tells us that this is a soul experience with UFO abductees. And while it is true that it is reported with UFO encounters, UFO abductees, it is not the only paranormal time that people report losing time or time being weird. If you just
True.
start digging into like Bigfoot cases, it starts popping up. I read a book about Nessie popped up, which I was like, okay, I mean Bigfoot, we've seen it now in Nessie. And I know there's even some ghosts. So I was like, okay. So that's where I was like, why didn't you put this in the first? Like,
Right.
and then like they show some interviews as well, or portions of the interviews from the first movie, but that didn't make the first one. And I was like, I mean, I feel like we could have cut. I mean, the
Don't
Vegemite
get
could go.
interviews for
Put
the
this
first
in.
one. I don't know. I rewatched the first one to try and see what Keegan saw, and so I might be confusing the first and the second one because I watched them like back to back again, so that I had a refresh for the second one. I don't think there was any interviews that weren't in there for in the
Well,
second one.
well, just like the second one, they showed like extensions of the interviews where like it talked about the missing time. Like, and he cut it, and
Might have been
I'm
like a
just like,
different discussion, like at like the later point, because I know there was like recaps from the first one and the second one, but I don't know. It's like it's hard to say when they like did the filming or any of that.
yeah, when they
It's like
filmed the interviews, it's hard to
it
tell.
may have made it seem like they did that in the first one, but like they did definitely recap the fact that like the group felt like attached to that location or like had a connection with that location.
Yeah, so I felt it was odd because to me, especially, I mean, obviously we don't see the 9 minutes in continuous that also on the time's gone, right? But to me, that seems like better evidence than the lights coming on, and it just seemed odd that you don't include that.
True.
Like,
But again, like if it a reason for not doing like not including it, I would feel as if like they didn't like because when we investigate, like if we check the time one time and then we check it another time, and be like, how did we lose an hour without knowing? Like because there's stuff that we could be doing, like filming like at different locations. So it kind of would make sense to leave that out just because that's not like super significant unless you're like checking the time a lot. For like a ghost thing like that, the only time you would want like the time thing is if you are catching something specific at like at like certain times. I feel because like it would. I mean, it would be good to include that, but at the same time, when you're investigating, you're spending like a couple hours at like specific spots, like for periods of time. Like when we did Adams Day, we did it like what? It was like every hour or so, or was that like every 30 minutes?
about every hour we switch floors, yeah.
Well, when we were like first switching groups, then it became like just floors and all over the place and everywhere.
Just everyone for themselves.
Yeah, there was like a time that we were trying to like let everybody use the like equipment and like try and check places, and then it kind of just we weren't really checking the time because we were just exploring the entire building at that point. So it would have been something to add, but then also I could see why they didn't.
It's
I
just
don't know.
weird
How do you feel?
because
That kind of cuts you off.
it to me it's weird because they even show footage of her that's purported to be from that same night where she's like, "How did we lose an hour? It's already 12, blah blah blah." And so they have the footage, and they say they knew it there, and then he even admits that he didn't. He cut it out, and to me, it just seems very odd to cut it out because even, I mean, that's
To a
something.
sequel.
Yeah, yeah. It ends on a cliffhanger, we'll say. At least it says, "I've been thinking about something." Boom, to be continued. But then
Right.
going back to the smile people, he tells us that he was in his house, like up at his front door, and then he turns around to get his phone, and then when he's back, they had casually walked away. He says it was
Or they were
only, yeah, he says it was like only 10 seconds, but again, we don't know for sure. Like they don't show us any pictures or anything to show us like truly how far away his door was from where they kept the phones and stuff or whatever however he put it. He
well,
estimated 10
it's like
seconds.
some people have like those like I'm sorry, I keep cutting you off for some reason. I don't mean to, Keegan. Continue your thing, and then I'll say mine.
But yeah, so he says 10 minutes. He says this is purportedly his old house, which is you see the roof above the fence, but the fence is high enough where if the people get up, like you might still be able to see them if they are casually walking, and we'll get to my idea with that. But then he says it's about 75 feet. We're not for sure. We don't know. Then he goes back to like scientifically test this. And this is where I was like, this doesn't seem very scientific, like method of testing. Because how he tested it is he sets out this 75-foot marker. We're not for sure because we only see it from one angle. We don't actually know if it's actually 75 feet away, but we only see it like looking down. It's also it looks like he lives in some townhouses now. So there's not the upgrade. There's not of the driveway. There's not the fence. So you're not really recreating the event. You're just seeing could people, if they had casually walked the whole time, actually walked.
Yeah.
And but at the same time, he's like, they only made it halfway. Well, then turn the camera and show us it's only halfway. Like that's where I was like, this is. I have some issues with how this scientific t- scientific test was done. Now, my idea is, at least based off of how I kind of took it, was they had at least started kind of showing off the film. So these people could have just known him. Obviously, they're on the island for 2 years. They could have even seen him on the island. Maybe they're just playing a prank on him, right? And then as soon as he turns around, he doesn't know if they're still casually walking. He doesn't know if they ran off. He doesn't know if they ran and got into a car that someone was waiting for them. Like there's so many unknowns, and that's where I was like, I mean, and this, I mean, I get it. I get where people are like, this happens with a lot, but it just seems so strange and almost very wishful, if that makes sense. And we'll get to more of that with the cars following because I found that kind of also along the same lines.
Mm-hmm.
What was your take on it?
Yeah, I didn't know how to feel about it because like casually walking, yeah, you would within 10 seconds you would still be able to see them. I mean, if they started running, you would be able to hear the like loud footsteps of someone running potentially. Like within 10 seconds, you could hear somebody like running outside. So the fact that he didn't mention that was interesting. Um, I mean, when you looked at the driveway was definitely pretty long, and it like seemed like it was a little bit more than a 9% like steep, but I don't really know because it kind of looked like it went down a little bit further at like a more of an angle, but without like being there at the site, it can't really tell from like a camera because cameras can make slopes look steeper than they actually are or like not as steep as they actually are.
We know that from
But
Denver.
as far as it actually goes, like if they casually walked away, then yeah, you would still be able to see them. Like you would be able to hear a car driving away too, depending on how the sound is going that night, like if it's not like busy or not. But with the whole thing with the phone, like, because some people have like those shelves like in their door where like they can set like their phones or their keys on, because like some people aren't like addicted to our phones like we are now more a days or nowadays. We're like more, we always have our phones on us. Like some people aren't that way where they don't need their phone, so they like leave it towards like the front of the door or like leave it somewhere while they're like having family time or some stuff. So like it is strange to have your phone like somewhere, but like I mean it's not surprising like that some people would do that. I don't know, maybe like because like another theory is like besides the pranksters, like if it was a legitimate thing, like he didn't really look up in the sky, so maybe like a craft picked up these people, because like if it was like the alleged Men in Black people, like there's usually crafts there, and like they could just get picked up and then just dip out. I want to say it's that, but like I, from seeing the first one and the second one, I don't think it is. I mean, I would say more of it's like a prankster, because like he didn't really mention, because there is that fence there. Like someone could just be like hiding.
They
I
could
don't
just
know.
walk alongside of it and just you wouldn't see them because it was a pretty
Yeah,
tall fence.
walk alongside the fence, or also just hiding in the shadows of the fence while he's like doing that, and then like then leave from there once he's gone back inside. So there's like many possibilities that could have happened or could be like, yeah, it's hard to say. They even could have just been hiding around the corner of the house too.
Yeah,
Like
and
there's just too much there that like doesn't make sense.
yeah, we've actually been able to kind of find out that people, I'm sure, knew who they were. They seemed like they had a pretty big following. There's even some ghost tours where it says that, West Sydney Paranormal Research, you can book. It was sold out, 120 per person. There's a silver event Friday where again they're talking Sir No Face, the story. Then there's an investigation for 2 hours and then broken up. Then Saturday, 75 per person. So, I mean, it feels like at least there's the possibility that these could just be people that had seen him on a tour, seen him on the island because you could still camp when they were there.
True, they may have been like doing like helping with like investigations on that island as well, and like taking people on tours. Like it's not really mentioned about that at all or not, besides the fact that supposedly the government told them that they are no longer allowed to do like investigations on that island, which would counter that. Like they were told by the government that they can't do any investigations on that island and are kind of banned from it. But they also said disbanded as well. But like the group did disband, but like it was just very like, for better lack of terms, Jeremy Keegan's favorite Jeremy Corbell way of explaining it, where you're just like saying all these things at like one point to like almost confuse you, and then just kind of circling that like question opposed from
Answering it between 2013 and 2015, they're on the island.
Mhm.
At the very same time that they're on this island, which they make it to seem like they're the only paranormal team, right? At least that's how it came across in the first one. Especially at this time, they were specially invited. But in 2013, there is a show, Haunting Australia, where they investigated Cockatoo Island. Now, this wasn't just shown in Australia, it was also shown in the UK on UK TV, really UK TV, and the USA on Sci Fi. Obviously, that makes sense. It's where a lot of the ghost shows are. But this was at the exact same time. So I think a lot of my research was less to do with the aliens and more seeing what I could find out about these people. And that was one thing that was kind of interesting. Another thing is it doesn't they make it sound like in 2015 while Chad is like talking about this footage and giving like a presentation on the island, with electricity, which in the first one they said there was no electricity, but in this one they show like a nice plasma TV and stuff. He says that it shut down. Now, I was able to find, and it's hard. I mean, I probably have to use like the Wayback Machine or something to get more, because obviously now there's so many algorithms, it's kind of hard. But I was at least able to find one instance from that same year where someone is quite like nonchalantly just like talking about their trip to the island, how you get there, a bunch of the features, all these like really nice like little like billboards they have up.
But
He
when you sent me that one, that was like from 2018, which is like a couple years after the whole
no,
incident.
this is September of 2015.
Is it?
Hmm. That's why I thought it was good.
I might
And
have
so
been, so it was like hard to really depict.
yeah, so I mean it talks about like it's exploring Cockatoo Island is easy on your own using a self-guided tour or audio tour, which at that time cost $5. Obviously, with inflation being that this was from like 7 years ago, probably went up. You can also join organized tours, which we'll get to
Tour, the
because
tour. I was getting confused with the 2019 or
oh yeah,
2018.
yeah. So that brings us to tours. There's history tours. But if you remember from the first one, they were trying to get some, or at least what they were told, or what we're told is the government wanted to start ghost tours. Now, I'm not sure exactly when they started ghost tours, but I know around 2018 they had a shift in their, or started this new ghost tour, which cost about $45 a person. So again, there was some, obviously, it just would seem odd, but you can still go there today. It looks like possibly February sold out outside of the 18th and 25th. But if you're around Cockatoo Island, go sign up for a ghost hunt. If you guys are watching and you've been to Cockatoo Island, please let us know. Like this is something we really want to know, because if it was
Yeah,
open at all during this time, it like throws the story completely away.
true.
But yeah, so we know at least ghost tours did happen, and that was something we wanted to find out. And to me, that was interesting.
No, it definitely was.
And so, I don't know. To me, kind of digging into that puts holes into what they captured. I think at the end of last episode, and we'll get to more of the alien stuff in a second, but I feel like that stuff's kind of on its own because it's a lot of stuff that you can find from other sources. None of it really seemed like it was like brand new. Like even like the control board with the six fingers has been out since like 2004. So I did some reverse image searching, which is kind of hard when you're screenshotting what's on a phone, but at least it was able to bring up some like 2004 things. So at least we know that's also been out there a long time. I don't know. From doing the research, it starts to make, especially, we know he takes shots at other groups, and he says anyone that just runs around in a dark house at night could get a TV show. And he takes shots at some groups, but he props up a certain group. I'm not going to say names, but knowing that group and knowing at least one person involved, that's where I'm like, okay, let's look into this more. And now looking into it more just makes me question him. It also makes you wonder why. I mean, he's there, right? He's done all these big documentaries on ghost hunting, Blood Red Sky, American Ghost Hunter. He's there. Why is he not using his resources? Like, if that was me, I'd totally go use my resources. Who knows? They probably will never see this. But if you guys want to come on, talk to us, I'm more than happy. I just have questions. I just want to have some answers. I'm not going to say real or fake, even though I'm sure you guys probably think I lean one way. I
If
just
it
have
was Jeremy,
questions.
invested right now.
Jeremy Corbell directed this, it would be better. Jeremy is super enthusiastic. I mean, you've seen his films. Like he
Sure.
loves this stuff. But you know that. Like you know he's probably wanting to find that it is a UFO or it is the Skinwalker. You know, Skinwalker Ranch has all these, you know. But at least you know that going in. And you know what? I'm happy for him. He has lots of like energy and enthusiasm for this and he gets to live his dream. Happy for him.
Mhm.
With this one, it seems on the inside, that's how Chad is. Like, it seems very much on the inside that is his goal. Like, he is just as enthusiastic, but he puts on like this, like, I'm a skeptic. If Jeremy was in here, I feel like I would at least have some enthusiasm about it.
Mhm.
Don't think it's an alien if it's real. To me, I really didn't see an alien, even the first time. I'm not saying it's real, but if it's real, I would be more believable of a ghost. I'm not saying it's real
Okay.
though. I guess we'll get into the email portion with Mr. Skyfall, Mr. James Bond movie. One of the big things, I believe, it might have been from the packet. So if you guys see this and I'm wrong, I apologize. We've watched two of these in a row, and they throw a lot at you in both. It's like 2 hours of just like lots of information. It's almost like you need to take a notepad if you want to actually discuss it. But they talk about the Mexico volcano where there's a lot of UFO sightings. And I want to say, if you want to see a good episode about this, because it's not hidden, like it's kind of made off to be like it's super secretive, the UFOs, blah, blah, blah. Season 5, Episode 1, Expedition X, is called Ring of Fire UFOs. And it discusses this very volcano. Has some of the same footage from the people that shot it. So if you guys want to check that out and learn more about that, I just want to throw that in there because Expedition X, I think, does a really good job discussing it. Obviously, they have a skeptic and a believer, and I think that helps balance it out. But you learn a lot, and maybe there's some obviously paranormal stuff going on, and then maybe there's also some like actual just normal explanations. So go check that out. But then it kind of gets into like secret world history. This
Mhm.
race for the nuclear bomb, which at the time was the race for the atomic bomb. Obviously, they show Oppenheimer, which there's a movie about him coming out. I think Matt and I have already discussed doing that for a true history, so we'll be doing that in July. So stay tuned for that. But he obviously felt pretty bad about the atomic bomb, and so I kind of feel bad that he's been looped into this. It talks about Soviet Russia, China, and the U.S. like racing for this atomic bomb in Antarctica, looking for uranium. The first one was made from plutonium, and it was here in 1945 that it was done by the USA. White Sands. It's a site I want us to go check out sometime. Then it
Mhm.
gets to a little bit later after the whole like looking in Antarctica and being told no, which I think is a story we've heard before. That we've
Mhm.
wanted to go here. There's also stories we wanted to colonize the moon, and they said no, it's off limits. So both those stories are out there. It goes to Hitler, and you think it's just gonna go the normal like the Nazis like were contacted by like usually here they had some connection with UFOs, right? Like the UFOs met with them, blah blah blah. They were looking for all this and that. There's some pretty famous quotes where people who were around Hitler said Hitler actually was very against his archaeologists going out and trying to dig. Obviously, Himmler was the one going out, like he was very bought in. But Hitler
Well,
didn't want his archaeologists going out finding stuff because there was nothing to find and he didn't want the world to see. But it goes into one conspiracy that then you start to have to believe all these conspiracies. And it's the conspiracy that Hitler went to Argentina. Now, it's very well known Nazis went to Argentina. There was I think it was Josh Gates episode where he was actually at one of their like compounds or something, like on this beautiful lake, but it was like this Nazi hideout in Argentina. But they say Hitler survived this Skyfall guy. When we know, especially before this movie, there was a DNA test on his remains, which showed it was in fact Hitler that shot himself in the bunker after poisoning his wife or fiance wife. I'm not sure. I'm not too. I don't read too much on Hitler. I just know a lot of World War II stuff. So that's the first conspiracy I think you have to buy into going forward because if this guy is 100% true, you have to believe that fact. And that's where I start to question, is the Skyfall guy even real, or is it just made up because they were getting a lot of flack about the ghosts? I don't know. Again, if you guys want to come on and talk with us, we're more than happy. But then going from there, it's kind of like the basic UFO stuff. I think you hear multiple fights with UFOs. There's the very famous Battle LA, which was very loosely inspired into the movie. Obviously, very, very loosely, but happens in LA and they're fighting aliens. The official story was it was a weather balloon. I don't think a lot of people believe that. I don't know if a lot of people believe it was UFOs, but I mean, it was UFO fever at the time. So it wouldn't surprise me. And it wouldn't surprise me too. Hey, it could have been a UFO. It's a story I want us to talk about because it is interesting. We've seen how well the U.S. Can shoot down balloons as of late. We had that just happen, so it seems odd that they shot 400 rounds or something at this balloon and missed it every time, even in the time that this was supposed to take place. It kind of briefly talks about the different presidents, Truman, Eisenhower. He gets very hung up on Eisenhower's when he's leaving office. He gives that very famous speech where he talks about the military-industrial complex, and it gets very hung up on that term because like every 5 seconds for a while you just hear the military-industrial complex. I'm like, okay, it's not what it's actually called. He's just calling. He's when Eisenhower's talking about, he's talking about the idea or the but they use that word. They do show Kennedy briefly. I thought he would have been in more of it, honestly. But just kind of briefly, obviously his very famous "We go to the moon, not because it is easy, but because it is hard" speech. And then it goes into like Nixon doesn't bring up his. I don't think it brought up his Watergate stuff at all. Made him seem not like a terrible person. And then it goes into the NWO, which obviously I think everyone by now has seen the George H.W. Bush. We're going to create a new world order and we will succeed. Blah 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 video. It shows Reagan a little bit, no Carter, which is kind of weird because yes, Reagan was one of the presidents that talked a lot about UFOs, but so was Jimmy Carter, and so not to mention him, I felt was kind of odd. It talks about Roswell. It talks about two crashes, which is something I think other episodes have talked about. There was two UFOs that crashed, one with life, one with not. I'm not 100% sure if there was two crash sites or if there was a debris field and a crash site. Like obviously, Brazel found something weird, and if there's a real UFO story, I think Roswell is that case. Like I think that's the best. When we do our bracket, that's my vote. That is my vote, Sam. You already know. I'm gonna vote Roswell all day, all day. Not to say, I mean, obviously Phoenix Lights and stuff. There's lots of good cases, but I'm not 100% sure if there's the two crashed, like two UFOs that crashed, or just the debris field that Brazel found because he found a lot of debris, and then a possible craft. Then it kind of gets into its climate change thing again, which we saw at the end of last episode, but it starts talking about that. I mean, once it gets past like the history of UFOs, it just starts throwing out a lot of different conspiracy theories. And that's again where it's just kind of, I don't even know if I'm mad. I'm just like, I don't know. We'll let you talk for a little bit, Sam.
Yeah, I think the Germans were like trying to either look for or trying to become the Nordic aliens, which were kind of that Aryan styled, or is like known as the Aryan styled, where it was like blonde hair, blue eyes, like Nordic beings, like North beings, as it's kind of because they were up and they were the northern beings of the planet. Oh
And
man, they're coming hard.
I do think it would be interesting to go into maybe the history and see where it actually originated from, like when it originated, like our first true like source. It's kind of like looking at Atlantis. There's like two pretty big sources. Obviously, Plato, who wrote what a lot of people think is just like a myth to make build up their society and make them feel like they had this big military battle. But then there was another source that came in the 19th century that a lot of people, when they're quoting about Atlantis, they quote this fake book that he just wrote it as a fictional book, but people wrote it as truth. And
Mhm.
so I think it would be interesting because there's a lot of like I I
Yeah, one
do
thing I do when it was like talked about with them, I just it's escaping me right now at the moment, unfortunately. But I used to know kind of when they kind of came or when they started to come into or like into talk about. I can't remember off the top of my head right now.
I'll
But
tell
no,
you
I need
like
to
the Nordics are like the one alien race. I'm like, nah. They to me it's just like my least favorite one to talk about. I am interested to see where it like originated. I want to see like the first source. And not like books being like, oh, it was here, but I want to see that. Like, oh, this is the actual source. And that's why I'm just like, I don't know about Nordics. The Greys, um, in here are described as robots. How do you feel about that?
they weren't exactly explaining them to be robots, but they were more of explaining them as like being produced to create that like fake invasion before what they were saying was a real invasion, which that real invasion would probably not be a real invasion, but just a more of a more of like a first contact type of thing. Even though we've been in contact them with like a first global contact with all human race, opposed from just government, like secret government contacts with these extra dimensional beings. So I wasn't really a fan of them saying it was robots, but like it would make sense for them to create something like that. But then also wouldn't make sense because when we shot those down, they would be robots, and we would see that they're robots. So then it wouldn't credit the alien invasion to begin with, essentially, just because they would like unless their like protective skin is like super good. Once they're broken open, they would be robots, or if they just incinerate everything so you don't find any debris. So I
I,
don't see how that would be beneficial in the long run with that, because I think kind of the Greys maybe I think we were talking about it, but like probably is us from like either the future or a race that was like ours, but like made a mistake along the way and are trying to fix it themselves. Because usually when you hear talks about the Greys doing more experiments on people, but then also like having kids with people, and like we've talked about this in other episodes, but like they're they're the more most human like kind of species that are out there.
to actually have like actual like non-sterile children, you would have to be
Mhm.
super related. Like coyotes and red wolves can mate, and it's a coy wolf. And so if like greys are actually coming to Earth to reproduce or something, they'd have to be at some form genetically the same. So that's again where I was like, I'm not a huge fan of this idea.
No, I wasn't.
Trying to think what else. There's these two. They throw so much at you. It's so hard. I mean,
Because like there's a whole thing about the Arctic, which was interesting. Like we could spend a long time talking about it, but like it's just
at some point we will. We're
it's
gonna
just
come
like
back and
it's like
make
a
a
bunch of conspiracies compiled into one.
yeah. There's two
And
ways of thinking about this. Either he went online and found as many different conspiracies to jam into a movie,
mhm,
or he watched the 2017 films by Stephen Greer called Unacknowledged and incorporated a lot of that stuff into his film. After a lot of people
true.
get blowback on, because if you look at the paranormal community as far as like their feelings on this footage, it's not very positive. So I could see then, oh, it's an alien. I'm okay with it. It's a lot harder, and you know this. UFO like studying UFOs is a lot harder than like studying ghosts, right? Because at least ghosts, you know
There.
where they are.
I mean, we think we know where they are.
I mean, Mr. James Bond movie, Skyfall. See, now we're just gonna have to watch that movie and talk about it. Be like, we're watching this one just because of this other movie. But
So,
apparently they
Skyfall.
had.
Don't remember like the whole Skyfall thing. Bringing that back up because like I think I was originally gonna talk about that, but then we went off in a different tangent. But the whole Skyfall part is the part that I thought that I heard before because I forget. I don't know if it was actually Skyfall, and I don't know if I would even be able to find it now at this point. But like, there was talk about someone predicting like massive events happening, and like he was predicting them, but very precisely. Like he predicted it precisely, predicted like all of that stuff.
I mean,
It
there's a
was
couple
like
because we get like time
how
traveler people
anonymous
that
was
always.
actually doing it, and not like somebody. It was like anonymous was the ones actually predicting that stuff,
I
or it
did
was like
read a spoiler for part 3 about what Skyfall predicts.
I'm assuming Skyfall would be probably somebody within the government, which I'm assuming that's what they're implying. So they would kind of know when these events are going to happen to begin with because they're just it's what they're planning to do. And they could be making those events happen to like
I mean, if he's legit, he would definitely have to be someone in the government that has like a lot of knowledge, right?
right very
Honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if Skyfall was completely fictional.
true.
Because if you remember, the editor from the last movie, his name was Dan. Our host's middle name is David. There's also Dan and David that work on Skyfall, the movie. It maybe it's like a soft admission about what really happened in the first film. I did do some research on his CGI expert. It looks like he had not worked since 2013. So while he did do some technical stuff, it looks like he doesn't do it anymore. Not sure why. He did have a decent amount of movies under his belt. But that was another piece of research. I think it at some point we're gonna do like
What
an
if
actual
he
episode.
discredited it?
What?
What if this movie was like a part of him being like discredited almost? Because they're just like,
Somebody
really,
was
you did?
like, yeah, someone was like, you didn't lighten the shadow. You just like pretended like you couldn't. You know what? No, you're off. You're off. Get out of here.
Right.
I don't know. I like I said, at some point we're gonna do an actual episode, not just a review, but like an in-depth movie. But I mean, this could be a very long episode, but we're gonna go in depth about each piece. We'll rewatch these, write notes, see what we can find out. It might be released in parts because there's a lot.
There's a lot.
But I think and the more by part 2 now, I'm definitely leaning more towards one side of this argument.
Yeah, we need more time to kind of like dive deeper onto each piece because like there's just a lot thrown at you in this second one that like if you're a conspiracy person, oh yeah, you're gonna enjoy. Like there's a lot of conspiracies in there that I remember from around that time that like I thought were like I was just like, dude, that's crazy. Like I never like fully invested into them. I always just was like, that's very interesting. Like it was like there was some that yeah, I may have like followed for a while, but then I was just like thought more about it and I was just like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Yeah, we would have to do a deep dive on like a lot of them because there's just so much in that one. there's just
Yeah,
there's
the
just
first
too much.
two the first two are each almost 2 hours long. Like they're
Mhm.
both, I think, 148 minutes, both of them. Maybe one's 1 hour, 47 minutes. But there's a lot in both. And at least with that first, I mean, this one, while I don't think the content is quality, at least there's enough content to at least justify the runtime. Whereas the
Mhm.
first one, there's a lot they could have cut out. Some beautiful shots of Sydney Harbor, but there's a lot. I mean, we don't need Vegemite for like 15 minutes. Like, we don't need to hear about like Vegemite. And I think another issue is he spent almost the entire first 2 hours of this trilogy telling you how he thought this guy was lying to you about very small details that aren't big things. And so that he's plant again, if that's not his goal to like discredit this guy, he's planting that into your subconscious the first episode, and then it makes you then like question the rest of it.
True.
And so maybe it's just poor direction on his part. I mean, I get you got to be like skeptical, but like if you do think this guy's true, at least show us some better evidence too of why. Okay, I did think this guy was lying, but he showed me this. I believe him, because then at least it gives us closure and understanding as far as why he switched his mentality.
Yeah.
It was just very strange directorial choice. I don't know if I would have made.
Yeah, it's a very interesting choice, that's for sure.
But I think we'll get into rating and recommendation. Sam?
I honestly want to change my rating for the first one after rewatching it from like a 7 to a 5, and I'm probably going to go with the same for this one as probably a 5. Like the
That,
first time
that
I watched it, I was just like super crazy. I was like super, like I was just like, damn, this is like interesting. But like watching it the second time, like after the first one, I wasn't really watching it for a second time. It was just kind of going, but like rewatching it again, I was just realizing that it was basically like a bunch of conspiracies, like Keegan was saying, and yeah, it just felt like a conspiracy movie.
like one of those top 10 compilations on YouTube.
Yeah, it
Top
felt like
10
a
conspiracy.
compilation. Like it was like a compilation of a bunch of conspiracies. So I mean, like, yes, I do think he like does it well, and like unlike Keegan, I think he kind of does like a good job. Since Keegan likes to bring up Jeremy as like a UFO guy, like yes, he is enthusiastic about it, but like, I mean, Chad definitely makes a more serious one because like you could just like I don't know, he's like putting more emotion into it. He's acting like he's putting more acting into it.
He's acting, you're right. He's
I know, and that's why I was just like, yeah,
I'm not saying his films okay, I won't say that his films don't look nice. There's definitely some things I would cut out as far as you don't need to repeat every single word like 5 times or sentences 5 times. Like this one had it a lot
or
more than the first
off
one.
into the distance with certain things. Like I think that's a neat feature in his where he's like repeating like a saying and like it's just slowly fading out.
I mean,
But they
I
do it
think
a
it's
lot in
yeah, I
movies.
think the first one did it like once or twice. Like it wasn't that bad. This one does it like
Or
oh
twice. You have to rewatch the first one. They do it a lot in that one.
dude,
And no, they do it a lot in the second one. No, you're right.
I
They
think
do
they
it a
do
whole
more
lot in the second. Yeah.
because the
I think
first
they're
one
about the same, honestly.
maybe I just picked up on it more since we've like binge watched these in the second one
Right?
more than the first, but it definitely was annoying me as I was like, okay, don't we don't need to do that. But
Right.
I just what I think when you compare the two, though maybe Jeremy believes different things than I believe, he seems more sincere in his approach because
I don't
he's
know why
not
we keep
putting on a
rewatching
facade.
this movie. Like,
We're gonna have a movie face off, and it's not even gonna be a movie. It's gonna be like Jeremy Corbell or Chad Kalick.
yeah.
Kalick, what's
Okay.
his name?
Chad Chad Kalick.
Chad Kalick versus Jeremy Corbell.
I'm done.
For me, I will say I would honestly rank this a 3 out of 10.
Yeah.
It didn't make me angry. Okay, it did at parts. At one part,
Hold on, Keegan.
uh, at,
Yeah, they're so sorry.
at one part I actually accidentally like heard them wrong, and I thought they said they were in a race to make the first bomb in 1953, and I almost like rage quit right there. I rewound it, and it was 1933, and I was like, okay, I might not. might not believe the story, but at least they sprinkle history in. But at the same time, after watching this, like the first one, it's just paranormal related. I didn't I didn't say it was real footage. It was shot nicely. Definitely a lot you could cut out. Sam's frozen.
Am I frozen?
Okay, you're back,
You've
but
been
it's like,
freezing a couple times too.
oh, okay. But with that one, I was still really. I mean, I knew where they were going in this one as far as what they were going to say it was in part two.
Yeah,
Having watched part two, I'm super disappointed because I don't think they put any good evidence towards that what their explanation was. And I know part three is not about it, but it wouldn't surprise me if a guy came up and handed him some papers or a photograph or a video of a yowie and said it's a baby one that you caught. And then the whole third one was about that.
talking
Like
about the Yowie. Watch the first one. Oh God, here we go. Ours is gonna be longer than the actual movie.
longer than the movie.
But the Yowie was the investigator, like him and his wife and his youngest son Diesel searching for like a Bigfoot. It wasn't like they didn't talk about it, but like they threw it in there that like they did a search for it one time, but they didn't really elaborate on it.
No, but he made
So
sure you knew that Billy Ape.
huh?
He made sure that you knew that Billy Ape was not a Bigfoot. And I was like, who thinks this is a Bigfoot? Like I almost want to know that. Like who's like talking about this? Because I need to go like to that presentation and be like, guys, here's this Nat Geo doc that this is from with a Billy Ape in the Congo. you know?
True. I mean, when did they figure out that it was not a Sasquatch? What year?
They've never said it was a Sasquatch. Like it's legit from a documentary about these apes in the
They said
or these
Sasquatch in there. I think they were looking for the Billy Ape, and that like we're just assuming that they said Sasquatch, but I don't think they ever did say Sasquatch in there. We're just assuming.
well he says it. He said fake as SHIT Bigfoot. And I'm like, who said that was a Bigfoot? Like if you watch even YouTube videos about the Billy Ape, they use that footage. So I'm like,
I
who said that?
to
Who
figure
said
out if he does say that. I don't think he says that.
watch it when they go through that because obviously he throws a dig at the Patterson Gimlin.
I don't
But
want to watch it yet.
we have to watch it again. Remember, we already told the fans we're going to do a multi-part episode breaking this down bit by bit. This one just left me kind of exhausted because there's so much in it that you've heard before or that's just like blatantly not true. That it just like I was exhausted at the end. I still want to see what part three is. I'm really hoping it's about a Bigfoot. I know it's not, but uh, it's shorter. I think it's only an hour this time, so luck out
Weird shit
there.
happened. I'm just gonna tell you, weird shit happened in that one.
Do I recommend it? I guess if you watch the first one, finish the trilogy.
I don't know if I even said I recommended it. I
If you
mean,
were,
yeah, I would watch it because it's interesting. I'll wait. No, finish yours. I keep cutting you off. Why do I keep doing that? I didn't say I would. I didn't say if I would recommend it, but through his, yeah, I would. If you watch the first one, might as well watch the second one just to see how it goes out, and then say the same for the third one. And it seems like there's going to be a